Hi, Professor Wills here. So we are continuing to examine publicly funded artworks. We've seen examples on the local level, but what about on the federal level? Well, you have probably already watched the piece about the WA program, the Works Progress Administration that was created by Roosevelt during the 1930s here in the United States. Also, as an offshoot, of course, for the benefit of the arts, the Federal Art Project, which provided jobs for countless artists for various projects that would serve public interests. So that was a huge success in the era of the early 20th century, in the Depression years. Fast forward to the 1960s, and you have in 1965 a federal independent agency created called the National Endowment for the Arts, or the NEA. This is an agency that is granted a budget, and from that budget, it can allocate money to various arts institutions from a variety of cultural disciplines, to dancers, artists, to works that become commissions, to grants to support exhibitions, performances, and the like. So it is a agency that is looking to support the arts across the country. And yet, by the time you get to approximately 2 decades later, it is mired in controversy. Well, what was that all about that almost resulted in the whole thing being shut down? What a tremendous loss that would have been for the arts. So let's pivot to my PowerPoint, and I'll tell you a little bit more of what happened back in the 80s. All right, we are examining art in the 80s and early 90s. Our overarching subject will take us into the 2000s as well, but we're specifically looking at the issue of government funding through the agency of the National Endowment for the Arts. By the way, there's also another agency called the National Endowment for the Humanities that you may have heard of. They also fund plenty of those programs on public television and public radio. So the NEA receives government funding as part of its budget to support art in the United States. As I mentioned, it can go to a variety of individuals and organizations. It can also inspire mere gifting of other additional grants. And this is part of the government's, desire to show and make a national statement in support of the arts and the essential role the arts play in our shared cultural heritage and artistic experiences as Americans. However, as we've seen in this class, art isn't always something that's made to be pretty and hang in our living rooms. It can be far from decorative. It can challenge our senses, ideas, and beliefs. It can hold a mirror up to the ugly part of ourselves, our fears, and our discriminatory beliefs. 2 artists became the targets of conservative politicians to attack the arts community and attack the support these artists were receiving from the public money that makes up the endowment of the National Endowment for the Arts. This is what went down in the 1980s. Robert Mapplethorpe and Richard Serra are the 2 artists who were in the crosshairs, so to speak, of many politicians and members of the public. It became an ongoing debate about whether publicly funded art should be acceptable in the eyes of government authorities in order for it to receive funding. So let's take a look at what the controversy was about. On the left, you have a work by artist and photographer Andres Serrano. It's called Piss Christ from 1987, using cyberchrome, silicone, plexiglass, and a wooden frame. When this photograph was part of an art show in North Carolina, at which the artist actually won an award, it caused a fury as its notoriety increased with that award. It shows a submerged plastic figure of Christ crucified, suspended in urine. It was immediately labeled blasphemous. And when Andres Serrano stated it was meant to be an insight into the suffering of Christ, the blood that emerged from him, and in fact there is an earlier work of his called Blood Christ showing this. But this describes that blood too, or urine too, would have left the body. It's meant to convey the distress of a crucifixion and the suffering of Jesus when he was crucified. Serrano has always said, I am a practicing Catholic. I had no intention of doing anything that would offend, but he further stated, if you feel upset, perhaps that drives home the suffering of Jesus to you more directly. On the right, we have another photographer associated with the 1980s, and that is Robert Mapplethorpe. This is called Self-Portrait from 1980, and it is a gelatin silver print. So around this time, perhaps a few years earlier, another exhibit featured the work of Mapplethorpe, and it included many images of the artist in androgynous ways. There was also a body of work with explicit homosexual erotic themes. That too sparked this brush fire of controversies and resulted in the arts from all corners of the country being attacked. This, of course, served politics, especially those looking to dismantle the NEA as an agenda item, and of course garner favor in doing so by winning votes in the ballot box, but threatened to cause a ripple effect in funding for contemporary art through state arts agencies as well. So when the NEA director refused to decline grants for 4 lesbian, gay, and feminist performance artists, Congress got involved and drastically reduced the NEA's budget to such an extent that they no longer could award grants and fellowships. Since then, the NEA has recovered, but it will never achieve the funding height it once had. It also underscores the ongoing debate about censorship and freedom of expression in this country. So, what is okay to have supported by a publicly funded federal agency? It is a topic today that exists in all corners of cultural expression, and you might be familiar with the controversy of a resurgence of book banning going on as well. So, be sure to keep your voters registration up to date and weigh in on this topic from your own point of view and value system. All right, that's it for this mini video lecture with some insights into the contrast between the popular public funded era of the 1930s during a national crisis and support coming from the federal government without question, and fast forward to a more modern 1980s era where it certainly was challenged. All right, have a good one.